and showing the rest of us that even though David is not in the kingdom, he's not in the presence of God, so to speak, God is still blessing him, still responding to him, still answering prophecy, still answering promises in David's life. And the text reminds us that Ziklag remains in Judah's hands even until the time that the book of Samuel was written. So God is reminding us that David, even though he's not being spoken to with an audible voice, he's not having the Urim and the Thummim, he can't get to the temple to ask what God wants, God is still blessing him. Ziklag is way out here in the middle of the desert. Gath is way up there at the top. Ziklag is way down there in no man's land. The other thing that the author of Samuel wants to tell us is that David is not committing treason. He is not attacking Judah. He is not rebelling against Saul. He is just out there defending himself, and he is attacking actually the enemies of Judah. And so he goes on these campaigns against the enemies of Judah, the Amalekites, who were old enemies of Israel, and he tries to deceive Achish all along the way. He is actually providing a measure of security for his homeland. What Saul was supposed to do, David is actually doing even though he's out of the country. He is fighting against the Amalekites. Back in Exodus chapter 17, the Amalekites were the first nation that attacked Israel after they came out of the land of Egypt. I figure, they thought that these Israelites were a bunch of farmers. They didn't know how to fight. They came out of Egypt with a lot of gold and silver and precious stuff, and they figured they'll attack them, get all their stuff, make them slaves, and hey, we'll pick on them. Well, it didn't work, and so God actually had to curse the Amalekites because of their attack. David even shares some of the things that he got from these people with the people of Judah. He is not only protecting the people of Judah, he's enriching the people of Judah, things that a king was supposed to do, but Saul was not. He is Judah's protector against these desert marauders. And then David tells his hosts, he tells Achish, excuse me, that he has been attacking the southern cities of Judah. And Achish buys this. I don't understand this guy's brain at all. In fact, throughout the book of Samuel, there is a lot of scorn for the Philistines. They're really quite stupid. It's like they were the butt of all the jokes. Did you hear the one about the Philistine? Instead of telling blonde jokes or Polish jokes or whatever jokes you grew up with, they told Philistine jokes. I have a Philistine joke for you. This is one of the oldest jokes in the world. I'm sure they dug it up out of the ground in Philistia. Knock, knock. Who's there? Philistine burglar. No, that's just as far as it went. No, because he's a burglar and he's knocking on your door. Very funny. I'm going to laugh at you next week. Anyway, one of the things, sorry, it must have been a Philistine joke. You must all be Philistines. You Philistines. Anyway, one of the things we need to notice is that God is absent from this chapter. Now, that doesn't mean that God isn't there, but his name isn't mentioned. You don't see the word God. You don't see the word Yahweh. You don't see his personal name. You don't see David talking to him. God is absent from this chapter, which is quite interesting. He's alone again. Now, we've seen this before. When Samuel died, was David going to respond the way that he should have? Is he still going to serve God, even though God isn't speaking to him directly? And this really helps us out because we tend to think that, these guys, God spoke to them all the time. And God helped them out all the time. But what did we do when God isn't speaking to us all the time, when we don't hear a voice, when we just have to rely on our own logic, on our own reasoning, on our own circumstances, on our own understanding who God is? What are we going to do? David, in this chapter, helps us. And then we have this renewed war. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then we have this renewed war with the Philistines. The Philistines go back on the offensive and they attack Saul, and this puts David in really a more impossible situation. Because now he has to persuade Achish, the king of the Philistines, that he is actually going to be going to war with him, and he can't go to war with him. He can't go to fight the Israelites because he's the anointed one. And now what does he do? Well, he seems to be able to pull another one over on Achish's head. Again, there's a lot of laughter at the Philistines and how stupid they were, or at least how stupid Achish was. And David gives this great response to Achish, and Achish buys it again. He even says, I'll make you my bodyguard. When all David has said is, yeah, I'll fight. He doesn't say who will fight or who will fight against. He's saying, yeah, and it satisfies Achish. So but then we have a sort of an interlude. David's dilemma is postponed until chapter 29, until next week. When again we find out that the Philistines are going to be fighting against Saul, and what's David going to do about this? But in the meantime, we have Saul trying to inquire of God about what he's going to do. And we come to these circumstances of Saul's last humiliation, last attempt at serving himself and not responding to the Lord, not repenting to God. Now, but first he gives us a little background information about what's going on. He tells us that Samuel has died. And again, we knew this earlier. We've been told that Samuel had died. And now we're told that Samuel is dead. And then what does Saul do? Is he still listening to the Lord? Is he still going to follow after what Samuel said? He hasn't been listening to Samuel yet, but we're told that Samuel, his mentor, is gone. And then we are also told that Saul had banished all of the mediums and the spiritists. These are the people who hold seances to call up the dead, who talk to demonic presences, who did all those kinds of things that were banned in Israel. And we'll talk about that in a minute as well. But Saul had banished all of them. Now, actually, Saul, according to the law, had been told to kill all of them, but he had merely driven them out. He'd done something good, but not totally what he should have. But driving out this specific sin of wanting to talk to the dead, that's what necromancy means, talking to the dead. Driving out that specific sin hadn't made Saul good. It didn't do what he should have. He should have driven the sin out of his heart of trying to manipulate God. Because people who talk to the dead, who do those kinds of things, are trying to manipulate this world. He had gotten rid of the surface, but he hadn't cleaned up the depths of his life. So this battle starts to form up. And this is the valley of Jezreel. It starts way up there with a dot and goes all the way down into this gray spot here down at the bottom. In fact, Jezreel is right there in the middle.